What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Awake and Jake College Football Show. And we might have had the best weekend of college football in recent memory. Absolutely insane, so much chaos. We are going to kind of switch up how we do the show today. Typically, I just kind of run through Thursday games, Friday games, noon slate, afternoon, evening. There's too much chaos with too many teams that we are just going to go conference by conference of the Power Four and just kind of break down how it looks moving forward for them. Some conferences are faring better than others after this weekend, but all in all, just a great weekend of college football. Like I said, a little bit of a different format, but we're still obviously going to recap the games. I will give my who I think should be in the playoffs this week, and then get into a little bit of a betting recap. Positive attitude, winning mindset. We turn this thing around. Just a little preview there, and then obviously we'll finish up with my favorite segment. Dude, are you high? But yeah, before we get into this crazy weekend that happened, let's take a quick smoke break. And like every other smoke break, this one's brought to you by coffee, because you absolutely need coffee for a wake and bake. All right, we're going to start with the conference that had the least amount of chaos, but still had some to an extent. We're gonna start with the ACC, and I'm just gonna mention three games: Wake Forest 14, Miami 42, SMU 33, Virginia 7, and the Citadel 14, Clemson 51. Why am I talking about these ACC games that were absolute blowouts and never close? Because they were blowouts and they weren't close. Definitely not the most chaotic games in the country. Definitely not the best games in the country or in the ACC. But why were these games so important? Because they were dominant wins by all three teams that needed to have dominant wins. And we're going to get into some more chaos, or actual chaos, and the other conferences here in just a minute. But because of these dominant wins by Clemson, SMU, Miami, the ACC is now in a seat to get more than one team in the playoff, which going into this weekend, ACC was a one bid league, Big 12 was one bid league. After this weekend, the ACC might get two teams in. I'm not going to push it and say three. It's getting a little too far ahead. But they do have a legitimate shot at getting two teams into the playoffs because of how those three teams dominated this weekend. Big Ten games. Not a lot of chaos in the Big Ten either. That's why we're getting into this one second. Not a lot of chaos. You could argue that the Ohio State-Indiana game was a little bit chaotic just because of what is the committee going to do with Indiana. But not a ton of chaos. But we'll get into the, two most important games. But I'm going to add in a third one just because it was fun. Indiana, Ohio State. Ohio State wins 38-15. Seems kind of like a blowout win, a dominant win, and it was a weird game because yes, it was a dominant win, but at the same time, the score does not reflect how the game kind of played out. That last touchdown by Ohio State game was over. They honestly could have just knelt the ball and won the game, but they chose to not do that and march down the field and score. Granted, it was like a 39-yard run or whatever by Travion Henderson, I believe. Got him down to like the 1-yard line. So at that point, we might as well just pound it in instead of just kneeling at the one. So I kind of get it. There's people out there that are getting pissed at Ohio State, like, you scumbags, you had the game won, just kneel the ball and get out of there. You run the ball one time, you happen to get a 39-yarder to bring you down to the 1-yard line. Why not just bump it in right there? Because we'll get into a team that decided not to do that later. Now, granted, it was a closer game, but we'll get into a team that decided not to do that same thing. But Indiana, they finally got their quality opponent, and they did not play well. They really didn't. They only had 153 yards of total offense, 2.6 yards per play, I believe is what that comes out to. Overall abysmal. Now, credit to their defense. You may say, why are you crediting their defense? Ohio State scored 38 points. Yes, I know they allowed 31 points technically because one of those touchdowns was a punt return. Can't blame that one on the defense. The other one was a fumbled punt, or the punter fumbled going to punt the ball and gave Ohio State like a 7-yard field to score. So, yes, they let up 31 points. That is slightly skewed because they only allowed Ohio State to get 316 yards of total offense, which I guess some people might say 316 yards, that's a lot. No, it's not. It's definitely not a lot of yards, especially for a team like Ohio State. Maybe for a lower level team, that's a lot of yards. For Purdue, that might be a lot of yards. For Ohio State, as talented as they are on offense, to be held to 316 yards of total offense, I'll give Indiana some credit for that one. Again, those 31 points are skewed, in my opinion, because right before half, like I said, Indiana went to punt it from deep in their own zone. Punter fumbled the snap. Ohio State recovered, 7 yards to score a touchdown. And then their very first drive out of halftime, I think it might have been a 3-and-out. They go to punt the ball, and Caleb Downs takes it 79 yards for a touchdown. And just like that, in the matter of basically like 2 minutes of game time, maybe 3 or 4, something like that, Indiana went from it being a tied game to down 21-7. You could argue the game was lost on those 2 plays on special teams. Now, I don't think that's where the game was lost. It definitely did not help. All in all, Indiana just could not get anything going on offense. Now, this is where the chaos comes in, because if you ask any SEC fan or media member, they are going to tell you Indiana finally faced their one good team of the season and they got destroyed. Kick them out of the playoffs. They don't deserve to be there. So who are you going to put in instead of them? Are you trying to we're going to get into the SEC, but are you going to put in a 3-loss team over them? No, you're not. Shut the fuck up. Indiana, when they lost this game, it didn't look great. You knew they were going to probably be at the bottom, but we're going to get into some chaos here in a little bit that saved Indiana, and I believe they should still be in the playoffs. And we will get into that later because, like I said, a lot of chaos happened this weekend. But if you ask any SEC fan or media member, they don't believe Indiana should be in the playoffs. You ask anybody else, and more often than not, they will say they still deserve to be in because their one loss was to the number 2 team in the country. They're supposed to lose that game. Doesn't matter what they're ranked. This one hurt. Minnesota Minute. Penn State 26, Minnesota 25. This one hurt so much. I think this hurt more than the Rutgers loss. I guess it was probably 2 different hurts. This one's just defeated and sad. Whereas the Rutgers loss was anger. Just straight anger. This is more just depressed because we had a shot to cause even more chaos than was already happening. We just couldn't quite do it. Minnesota loses by 1 point. Now, shout out to Minnesota's defense. Some people might disagree with that. Shout out to the defense because Penn State comes in and they are a team who has been fantastic at running the ball this year. And they couldn't do anything in that first half. They obviously found some more success in the second half, and I get that. But you still did a good job of containing the 2-headed rushing attack that they had. Now, a few times they let Drew Aller get out of the pocket and get some yardage. They just couldn't quite get to him a few times, and that was so frustrating. But you held Penn State to 1 of 11 on third downs, which that's fantastic. But you're 3 for 4. They were 3 for 4 on fourth downs, which was killer. Now, one of those was on special teams, which we'll get into, but still allowing them to go 3 for 4 on fourth down, killer. So I want to give credit to the defense because they had good moments, just couldn't quite do enough. Now, we're also going to get into it. The offense didn't fully help. You know what? Actually, let's just get into that right now. I guess congrats to the offensive line because Brosmer, he did have some pressure on him, and he did get sacked once. And some of this was game planned to also alleviate that pressure. But you allowed 9 tackles for loss. And I said it, the Key to this game was going to be the offensive line. Now, the reason I don't want to get after the offensive line too much is because I don't necessarily think they're really the reason the Gophers lost. There's a few things that we can point to. Max Brosmer, I love Max Brosmer. I wish he was around for one more year. And I think if you take away 2 plays in that game, he had a fantastic game. There's just 2 plays. That first interception, that only interception that he threw was killer, and you set up Penn State with a very short field to get a field goal. And then that fumble. You fumble the ball, and you give Penn State also decent field position, which they're able to drive a little bit and kick a field goal. Gophers lost by 1. That's 6 points they got off of turnovers. That's a win right there. Take away those 2 plays, though. Brosmer played great. Now, I didn't love the second and goal. I believe it was second down. It was second and goal, and you run a crazy trick play to your left tackle, throwing it to your left tackle. I did not like that play call. That play call sucked. I guess I kind of understand why you did it, catch them off guard, but they didn't really get caught off guard. If you watch the replay, Ursary is lucky that he didn't catch that ball because it looked like Abdul Carter was ready to at least try and tackle him. Who knows if he would have been successful, but he was going to make an attempt, and there was a chance Minnesota would have lost yardage. I didn't like that play call at all. Other than that, I mean, the offense played decent. I said it. They would do enough with Brosmer, Taylor, Spencer, Jackson to stay in this game. It was all up to the offensive linemen, and I don't think the offensive line lost the game. And another, I don't ever talk about special teams that often. And again, I'm hesitant to say shout out to the special teams because they had a blocked punt and they had a blocked extra point. And I don't remember the last time the Gophers blocked a kick, let alone 2 in a game. Fantastic. Absolutely great. But then, 4th quarter, fake punt, Penn State, trick play, they got it, caught the Gophers off guard, got a first down, kept that drive alive. And that hurt. That hurt them bad. That was such a momentum killer. It really was. So it's hard to say shout out to the special teams because of that, but every position group played great. There was just, or I should say, defense, offense, special teams all played great. They just had 1 or 2 mistakes on each one of those, and just those mistakes happened to be way too costly is really what it came down to. This game hurt. It hurt a lot. And also, the thing that's bugging me the most is because I knew this was going to happen. I called it. Penn State beat the Gophers by 1. If you watch the Big Ten, if you're a Minnesota fan, you know that the Gophers are better than their record shows. They could very easily be a 9-3 team this year. Instead, we're looking at possibly 7-5. Very good team, very tough beat, very good season. But then you got all these SEC media members and SEC fans just coming out and saying, oh, I'm supposed to be scared of Penn State because they barely beat Minnesota. People just no respect towards Minnesota, and it is so frustrating to see. I hate it so much, and I knew that was going to be a thing. Everybody's discrediting this win for Penn State because, oh, they barely beat Minnesota. Oh, Minnesota's bottom dollar. No, they're not. Minnesota's a good team, and it's just, I may have to take a break from Twitter this week. It's just going to be rough. And then the other Big Ten game I wanted to get into is just Illinois 38, Rutgers 31. What a game. It was an honorable mention, so I'll just say it now for Dude, Are You High? Because it's hard, and the reason it didn't win is because you can't really blame them for doing this, but Greg Schiano calls a timeout late in the game that he probably wishes he had back. Rutgers is up 31-30. Illinois, it's 4th and 13, I believe. Illinois goes to kick a 53-ish yard field goal, and right as they go to kick it, Greg Schiano calls a timeout to ice the kicker. But he didn't call it in time, or refs didn't stop it in time, and Illinois got off a practice kick. And they watched that kick, and it did not make it, and they decided, ooh, no shot in chance, no, not a shot in hell this has a chance of making it. So they decided to go for it on 4th and 13 from the 40, and Altmaier finds Pat Bryant down the field, who catches the ball in the middle of the field and then just outruns everybody to the edge into the end zone. And Illinois ends up winning the game 38-31. Absolute heartbreaking loss for Rutgers. Good for me because, a little bit of a preview ahead. I had Illinois money line on that one, or I guess that was the honorable mention. I had Illinois -1.5. So that one was cool. I like that one a lot. And it was a fun game. That ending was so crazy. I just had to include it with all this chaos that happened this weekend. All right. We're getting into the two conferences now that had the most chaos this weekend. We're going to probably start with the Big 12 because I want to save the SEC for last because the meltdowns are fantastic. BYU 23, Arizona State 28. I called it. I told you the magic has run out. Arizona State was going to run away with this one fast. Now, they almost gave it up, and we're not going to get into the ending of this game. If you watched this game, you know exactly what I'm talking about because this is kind of a spoiler. We need to talk about it later in this episode. So I'm not going to get into the craziness of it, but the Big 12 has been so exciting this year. It really has. It's been the most entertaining conference that we have of the Power Four. I'm not going to speak on Group of Five. Entering yesterday, there were 4 teams at the top, and that all had a shot at the Big 12 championship game, which also means a playoff spot, more than likely. And this game was just chaotic. Arizona State got out to a 21-0 lead. BYU did fight back and made a game of it. And again, I'm not talking about the ending of this game just because we do have to talk about it later. The only thing I will mention, though, is BYU had a shot to win this game with 1 second left in the game. That's all I'm going to say. They had a shot to win this game. Shout out to BYU for fighting back and making it a game, and shout out to Arizona State, guys. I've said it already. I said it earlier this year. I'm a Kenny Dillingham guy. I didn't know a thing about him heading into this season. I disregarded Arizona State, and I think everybody did. Shout out to Kenny Dillingham. If you don't like Kenny Dillingham, then I don't like you. I'm just going to put it that way. It's hard not to like this guy. So much passion, so much energy, and the dude, every interview with him has you a little pumped up afterwards and also thinking, wow, what a weird guy. Because he's just intense, and he's got this crazy eye that starts to go, and I love him. I do. If you haven't been exposed to Kenny Dillingham yet, you need to look him up, and I think you watch enough Arizona State, you will become a fan of him. I love his energy. I love his honesty. Again, if you don't like him, then I don't like you. This was a great year for Arizona State, regardless of how it ends. Colorado 21, Kansas 37. Kansas, the best 5-6 team in the country now. Holy cow. Think of how different this season could be for Kansas if just 1 or 2 games went differently for them earlier this year. If Jalen Daniels didn't take half a season to figure it out on offense or whatnot. We were so close to a great season for Kansas. And don't get me wrong, the way they're ending the season, winning 4 of their last 5 so far, I'm sure everybody's enjoying it. It's a huge what if. Just what if. Speaking of what ifs, what if I told you that Shedeur Sanders was 23 for 29 for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Travis Hunter had 8 of those receptions for 125 of those yards and 2 of those touchdowns? You see those stats and you would just assume, oh, well, Colorado dominated and won that game. But wrong, they lost 37-21. Kansas absolutely dominated that game from start to finish. Just with their game plan, they executed it perfectly. Colorado could not stop Kansas on the ground. And Kansas, since they couldn't be stopped, refused to give Colorado the ball. And Devin Neal, guys, Oh, and Kansas had the ball for like 40 plus minutes, by the way, too. Just could not. That's why this game is so lopsided, is because Colorado just never got the ball enough to even make it a close game. Devin Neal, guys, 207 yards and 3 touchdowns, over 5.5 yards per carry. Added on to that, 4 receptions for 80 yards and a touchdown. Absolutely dominant performance, almost 300 yards of total offense and 4 touchdowns. Just could not be stopped. He single-handedly beat Colorado pretty much. He scored more than they did. So shout out to Kansas for single-handedly destroying the Big 12, beating Iowa State, then beating by BYU, now beating Colorado, all teams who were at the top of the Big 12 and are still at the top, but all of them had playoff hopes and Big 12 championship hopes, and all of those are all of a sudden looking very rocky moving forward. Colorado has pretty much been officially removed from the Big 12 championship game. Again, it's the Big 12, can't rule anything out, but their playoff hopes are officially dead. Iowa State 31, Utah 28. This game was, again, ridiculous, like every Big 12 game. Iowa State had almost 200 more yards of offense than Utah and had the ball for nearly 11 minutes more on offense. And they still had to come from behind in the fourth quarter to win this game after giving up a lead. I get it. Utah's a tough place to play. Utah does have a good defense. And Utah doing their best to be like Kansas, and they almost did it, causing more chaos. But Iowa State is able to come from behind in a game they probably shouldn't have had to come from behind to keep their Big 12 championship hopes alive. All right, so here are the Big 12 standings as they currently lay. We got Arizona State at number 1, BYU at number 2, Iowa State at number 3, Colorado at number 4. All 4 teams win next week. You got Arizona State playing BYU for the Big 12 championship game, and we got a rematch. So that's the way it's set up right now, is for that rematch. And because it's the Big 12, let's be honest, that's probably not going to be it's probably not going to be a rematch. Something chaotic is going to happen next weekend, and it's going to be like Iowa State and Arizona State or something stupid like that. But right now, Arizona State plays 4-7 Arizona next week. That is a rivalry game, so you cannot count out Arizona. But I like Arizona State's chances to win that game and finish in first place. BYU, they play Houston next week. Now, yes, Houston's 4-7, so it should be an easy win for them. But Houston's been playing better of late, and they're not as bad as we thought they would be this year. I said it a few weeks ago when BYU was still undefeated that they could lose any one of their final 3 games, whether that's Kansas, Arizona State, or Houston. And look at that. They lost to Kansas. They lost to Arizona State. They could lose to Houston. It is in the realm of possibility for them. Iowa State plays 8-3 Kansas State next week, which that's not an easy win. There's no guarantee that Iowa State wins that one. So they need to win if they want any sort of shot. And then Colorado plays 3-8 Oklahoma State. I don't doubt Colorado's going to win that game. They need to win that game, and they need BYU and Iowa State to lose to play Arizona State. It's the Big 12. Anything could happen, because right now we're set up for that rematch of BYU and Arizona State, but because it's the Big 12, somehow I do not think that's going to be the Big 12 matchup. Something crazy is going to happen. It always does with them. All right, guys. The SEC. This makes me so happy because all week, all we heard is this 8-2 team shouldn't be this high. This other 8-2 team shouldn't be this high. This other 8-2 team shouldn't be this high. This other 8-2 team shouldn't be so high. This other exhausting. And all these SEC fans, we should be higher than Indiana and Penn State and Notre Dame and all these things because we're the SEC. We're the best. We're the toughest conference. And then 3 of the teams that they were all clamoring should be higher than Indiana and Penn State and Notre Dame all win and lost to teams they had no business losing to this weekend. And I was on Twitter or X or whatever this morning, and the SEC has been somewhat quiet today. I've seen a lot of people taking a victory lap, and none of them are SEC fans. So we are going to start with Ole Miss and Florida. Ole Miss, what the hell was that? Ole Miss is out of the playoffs. Ole Miss loses 17-24. They're out. They're out. There's no way that they're not. Shout out to Florida's bend don't break defense and Jackson Dart. What the fuck was that shit? 3 terrible interceptions thrown. Now, only 2 counted. 1 was called back, which he then immediately threw another one, so it's fine. But 3 terrible interceptions when they were down 7 late in the fourth quarter. The first one, dude threw it into like triple coverage. Intercepted. Terrible, terrible interception. The last 2, you could argue miscommunication between him and his receiver. Still terrible throws. Still got picked off. Like I said, 1 got turned over or overturned. They get the ball back, go to throw it, and immediately throws another interception to end the game. Just brutal. Tough day for like I said, Florida had a bend don't break defense. Just tough for Ole Miss offense. They had 2 drives stall out in the red zone. They fumbled a punt return to give Florida a short field and missed a 34-yard field goal. That combination of just terrible play and terrible luck adds up to losing to Florida on the road. Billy Napier, his team is fighting and they are going bowling. And they play Florida State next week, guys. They could finish the season 7-5. Now, don't want to toot my own horn, and don't want to toot it too early, but I did have Florida going 8-4 this year before the season. So 7-5 is not far off from what I had, considering I think the over-under on win total was 4.5. Shout out to Florida, finishing the season strong. I guess good for them. And I don't know if you saw it, there was a Florida fan, no, it was a Tennessee fan actually, that said if Florida finishes the season with wins against LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State, he will tattoo Billy Napier's face on his ass cheek. Well, Florida beat LSU, they beat Ole Miss, and look at that. They play a terrible Florida State team next week, and they are going to be favored to win that game. This dude better start making his appointment. Alabama 3, Oklahoma 24. Alabama is out of the playoff. Shout out to Oklahoma's defense. Only 234 total yards allowed. Jalen Milroe, what the fuck was that? 11-26, 164 yards, 3 interceptions. What? And you could only score 3 points against Oklahoma. Now, don't come at me and say the refs screwed Alabama out of a touchdown, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to hear it. They still played an absolutely terrible game. So, sure, refs screwed them out of 1 touchdown. They still had plenty of other chances to march down the field and score. But no. Jalen Milroe threw 2 of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. One was a pick 6, which gave Oklahoma 6 points right there. And Jalen Milroe with the worst tackle attempt I've ever seen in my life. Didn't even try to tackle a defender as he was the only person that had a chance. And then the other was, again, a terrible interception that was returned to like the 7-yard line, 10-yard line, something like that. Extremely short field regardless, and they were able to punch it in for a touchdown. Now, I'm not going to totally shit on Bama's defense because technically they did allow 17 points. But like I said, one of those was a very short field. It was almost impossible to not allow some sort of points. So they only allowed 10 points if you ask me. And it's just so beautiful because, again, you had Alabama fans saying, we deserve to be in the playoffs because of our wins against here, and here. And then you had every other SEC fans, yeah, well, you lost against Tennessee and you lost against Vandy, so you shouldn't be ranked that high, blah, blah, blah. Well, they just lost, so it doesn't matter now. 3 losses, they're out, so it doesn't matter. It's beautiful, and I just love it so much. Bama's defense played well enough to win this game. Sure, Jackson Arnold was 9 of 11, only 68 yards. Where they did get, I won't give them their credit, was on the ground. They could not stop Arnold and Xavier Robinson. They combined for over 230 yards on the ground between the two of them. So that wasn't great. But like I said, if you ask me, Bama only allowed 10 points. It's the offense that screwed them over. I give 2 of those touchdowns to Alabama's offense, even though the defense let one of them up. Texas A&M 41, Auburn 43 in quadruple overtime. Texas A&M might be out of the playoffs. They have a better shot at making the playoffs, actually, believe it or not, than Alabama and Ole Miss at this point. Because if they win against Texas next week, I believe they're in the SEC championship game, which is bizarre. So I guess technically their playoff hopes are still slightly alive, but they're basically dead. This game was so fun. Honestly, this might have been the game of the day or the night, however you want to look at it. Auburn got out to a 21-0 lead, and A&M just started to fight back the whole game and eventually took a 31-28 lead with 4 minutes left in the game. Now, obviously, because it's quadruple overtime, Auburn did tie the game up, took it to overtime, and in overtime, the refs tried their best to give A&M the win. A no call on one play against, which should have been against A&M, and then one play later, called a penalty against Auburn that was one of the worst penalties I saw called on the day. So the refs tried their best to give A&M the win, but Auburn just had a little bit of magic, and like I predicted, A&M, whenever they have to go against a good defense, they lose. They went against a good defense and they lost. Yes, it was in overtime. They still lost. So here is where the SEC standings currently sit. We've got Texas at the top, Georgia at number 2, which preseason and even earlier this year after Georgia and Texas played, I predicted Georgia and Texas for the SEC championship game. It's looking like it's going to be Georgia and Texas for the championship game. But who knows? Crazy things have happened. Who knows? Georgia's already played their full SEC schedule. They have no more conference games. Their record is set. But Texas, Tennessee, and A&M also have to play a conference game, so we'll see what happens there. But you got Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, A&M. Texas plays A&M next week. A&M plays Texas next week, so that's going to work itself out right there. Georgia plays 7-4 Georgia Tech, which it's not a guaranteed win. Let's be honest. It's a rivalry game, and I've said it all year. If Haynes King plays, anything is possible. He didn't play great this week and didn't play much this weekend or on Thursday, but when he plays, Georgia Tech has a chance. And then Tennessee plays 6-5 Vandy, which, again, this isn't your normal Vandy team. They can beat anybody with Diego Pavia, so no team is necessarily of these top 4 is guaranteed to win this weekend, but like I said, Georgia's already got their conference schedule set. They're done. I don't think there's any way Tennessee can make the SEC championship game at this point, and A&M could make it if they beat Texas this weekend. Otherwise, it's looking like a Texas-Georgia rematch. All right, so let's get into, the playoffs how I would have it, because I know the committee put Boise at 4, so they would have the bye. I'm not putting Boise there. People might disagree with that. I'm just not doing it. I can't do it. I refuse to rank them that high right now. Next week could create even more chaos where I officially do, but I just can't do it yet. So I have Oregon at the 1 spot, Texas at the 2 spot, SMU at the 3 spot, and Arizona State at the 4. So all 4 of them would receive a bye, which means Oregon as the 1 seed would be taken on the winner of the 9 versus 8 seed. At 9, I have Miami. At 8, I have Notre Dame. People are going to disagree with that. People probably think Notre Dame should be a little higher. I still cannot forget that Northern Illinois loss. I know they only have 1 loss, and that's the only loss. So they deserve to be in the playoffs. I'm not going to argue that. But it's such a bad loss, I have them at number 8. Number 2, Texas would be taking on the winner of 10 versus 7, which would, as I have it right now, Georgia as the 10 seed, Indiana as the 7. Now, I know that's going to get a lot of hate. Indiana does not deserve to be 7. They should be dropping way further than that. They lost as the number 5 seed to the number 2 seed. We never see high-ranked teams, when they play another very highly ranked team, drop more than 5, 6, 7. That never happens. They do not drop that drastically. If you want to argue they should be at 8 or 9, fine. I guess I can listen to that argument. I'm dropping them to 7. This is my playoff prediction, not yours. SMU at 3, at the 3 seed would be taking on the winner of 11-6. I have Tennessee at 11, Penn State at 6. Again, do not come at me saying Penn State deserves to be lower than the 6. You could argue they should deserve to be higher than the 6. I don't really care. Again, in the actual rankings, they are going to be ranked higher than 6. It's just they're not a conference champion, so that's why they have to be 6. But regardless, Penn State facing Tennessee, don't tell me that they don't deserve to be in the playoffs, because they definitely do. I saw the most outrageous tweet out there today by a well-renowned college football Twitter account, Big Game Boomer, asking the question, does Penn State deserve to be in the playoffs? What the? Are you serious right now? They have one loss in the Big Ten to the number 2 team in the nation. They 100% deserve to be in the playoff. Just absolutely bizarre. Arizona State I have as the 4 seed. Again, you could argue, I guess Boise should technically be there. I don't know. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going there yet. They would be taking on the winner of the 12-5 game, which would be, as I have it right now, Boise State versus Ohio State. I think we all know how that one would end up going, but that is how I have it set up. So I got, like I said, Oregon, Texas, SMU, Arizona State on the bye. Miami, Notre Dame meeting up at Notre Dame. I got Georgia, Indiana meeting up at Indiana. Tennessee, Penn State meeting up at Penn State. And Boise State, Ohio State meeting up at Ohio State. This isn't the final rankings. We still have 2 weeks of college football to play. That's when it will officially be decided. This is just how I have it playing out right now. So then the 2 teams that I have on the outskirts looking in or being the first 2 teams out, Clemson, Iowa State. Again, you can maybe argue Iowa State doesn't deserve to be there. You could put a different team there, maybe. I guess I'll listen to that argument that it should be BYU. But I have Clemson right now as that first team out. All right, let's get into my betting recap for the week, guys. Positive attitude, winning mindset. We're turning this thing around. I went 5-0 this weekend, and as a whole, I went like 19-3. Absolutely killed it this weekend. 5-0 brings me to 35-36 on the year. I am almost above 500. I'm only down 4.7 units. It's looking great, guys. Like I said, positive attitude, winning mindset. We have slowly turned this thing around. I'm hitting at a 49.3% rate, which is not great, but not terrible, not as bad as it's been. We're not going to talk about the parlay. Ole Miss fucked that up, which I'm not even mad because it created ultimate chaos, and I thrive on the chaos. So that's 2-11 on the year, down 6 units. Not great. Don't want to talk about it. My buddy, not a great week for him. He still beat me. There's no way I'm going to win, so the competition is over. But he did have Indiana money line, Pitt money line. Those did not hit. He had SMU and Baylor money lines. Those did hit. And then his parlay of Ole Miss, Mizzou, Minnesota, Illinois, sadly did not hit. So he went 2-2 on the week, 30-14 overall, hitting at a 68% rate. He's up nearly 16 units. And with that parlay not hitting, he is 3-8 on the year on parlays, up 2.8 units. Guys, turning it around. We are going to finish the season above 500. I'm telling you right now. Bowl season, by the way, does not count towards the record. Bowl season is going to be its own record just because it is so difficult to predict who's playing, who's not, who gives a fuck, who doesn't. So this record is going to be a regular season, conference championships, and then the playoffs. Bowl season is going to be a whole different thing just because, like I said, it is just so unpredictable. So just so you know, moving forward, we got 2 more weeks of the regular season and championship week. And maybe I'll throw a little on the Army-Navy game. Who knows? But, and then we'll count playoffs towards this record as well. All right, time to get to my favorite segment. Dude, are you high? But before we do that, we got to take a quick smoke break. Time for, dude, are you high? Already mentioned one of them earlier. One of the honorable mentions, I mean. Referees are always going to be nominated. I know you could point to a handful of calls, missed calls, non-calls, whatever. It's every weekend, but I didn't think any were egregious enough to win it. Another honorable mention that I did mention it earlier, I just didn't mention it as an honorable mention. That play call by the Gophers on 2nd and goal. You're driving down, you're in the fourth quarter, it's late, you need a touchdown to take the lead, and you call that. I hated the call. I hated it when it was called. I hated it after. I hated it, hindsight 2020 being the next day after we've lost the game. I hated it the whole time. I'm not putting the blame on any one person, but as a collective, dudes, are you high? Can't be calling that. But I mentioned how we had to talk about this later in the show. Dude, are you high? The ending of that BYU Arizona State game. I'm going to put some of this blame, or most of this blame, on Kenny Dillingham, so I guess he's going to win. Dude, are you high? But we're just going to put it on the ending as a whole, just because there's a little BYU mixed into this. BYU has the ball. They're down 5. They're trying to drive and win the game, keep some of that magic alive. Retzlaff throws a deep ball to a wide open receiver and overthrows him, and it was going to be a touchdown had he just put a little more air under it, a little less arm strength on that. It was a touchdown. Bummed, whatever, lived to fight another down. Next play, throws an interception, and Arizona State takes it all the way down to the 7-yard line. And you're thinking, oh, well, that's game. Arizona State's going to take it, run the ball a couple times with Scadaboo. He's been having a great game. He's just going to pound it right into the end zone. We're going to go up 2 scores, win the game, right? You'd think. Kenny Dillingham. I love me some Kenny Dillingham. I don't understand I do understand what you're trying to do, but dude, you can't be doing it. First play, hand it off to Scadaboo. He runs it to like the 3-yard line. Perfect, 4 yards. Hand it off one more time. Punch it in the end zone. No, instead we're going to hike it to Sam Leavitt, who is just going to scramble around in the backfield and lose us like 15, 20 yards trying to take time off the clock. And then we're going to do that again on 3rd and goal and scramble around in the backfield, taking time off the clock and trying to run out the game. Then we're just going to let the clock run all the way down and take a delay game. So we're going to be all the way to like midfield almost. And it's technically 4th and goal. So what are we going to do at this point? And you weren't quite at midfield, but you were far enough back that you basically were. Final play of the game, 4th and goal at like the 40, 45-yard line. 7 seconds left on the clock. They hike the ball to Sam Leavitt. He sprints out to the right until he can't anymore, and he's about to get hit, and then he just launches the ball as high as he can and as far out of bounds as he can. And you think that that's game because the ball doesn't land, clock hits 0, then the ball lands, and, well, that's game. Fans storm the field, start tearing down the goalposts, and the refs decided, no, we need to look at this to make sure that the game is actually over. There could be a second left. Sure enough, if you watch the replay, the ball didn't land out of bounds, and that's the rule. It has to hit something out of bounds for the clock to stop. The ball landed in the stands with 1 second remaining, which means BYU was going to get the ball basically at midfield with 1 second left on the clock to try a Hail Mary. So they have to then, and Kenny Dillingham is losing his mind, yelling at the refs, saying, there's no way, that's bullshit. And he's got this crazy look in his eye. And Kenny Dillingham's so great, I love it. So they have to clear the field. Like I said, they already started tearing down one of the goalposts. So they ended up having to leave it, just played to the opposite side. But it took like 20 minutes to get everybody off the field because, again, everybody had filtered down. And then BYU gets one last shot, and Jake Retzlaff launches a throw, and it gets caught at the 2-yard line. 2 yards short of completing the Hail Mary to win the game after Arizona State thought they did. It was just absolute wild scene at Arizona State. That whole ending to the game was just high as hell. We're going to single it down to Kenny Dillingham, but dude, are you high? It was fantastic. What a great weekend of college football. It really was. This might have been the best weekend of college football this year, and I'm not going to say of all time. I'm not going to be obnoxious about that yet, but it was a damn good weekend of college football, and if you missed it, I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. You really missed out. It was so exciting. This next week, it's just going to be business as usual, even with Thanksgiving. Still going to release a preview for rivalry weekend, Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So you can expect a Thanksgiving episode, I guess. But yeah, thank you all for joining me. I'll talk to you guys Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving, and what a great weekend.